I get the question all the time on EB-5, what are source of funds and how do you even track source of funds? It's almost like it's the literally the $1 million question of how do we get an EB-5 approved and what do I need to show from an investor? We always talk to investors about showing a source of funds as being part of a forensic accounting, essentially, is what immigration is looking for. We talk to investors about we need to be able to show the funds from the day that it was printed to the day that it got into your bank account to how it's transferred to the developer regional center or wherever they may be investing the money. And this can be a very daunting task for some investors. However, it can be simplified just as long as your attorney is looking at the source of funds as an opportunity to explain the story of where the funds came from. For example, we get investors all the time that have multiple different sources, which is very, very normal. They may have salary, they may have stocks, they may have life insurance, they may have 401k, they may have gifts, or they may even be talking about home equity loans. Which one of these are allowed and which one of these are not allowed? And how do you trace them? How far back do you go? These are all legitimate questions that investors ask constantly. What we always want to remind investors is that we want to give immigration the perfect story of exactly where your funds came from, because what immigration is looking for is they want to make sure your funds are legal. They want to make sure that you earned your money, that it wasn't from any illegal activities, that it wasn't sent here illegally, and the taxes have been paid on that money. A great example of funds that we see that are coming from overseas or money that is gifted. Well, a lot of people that are in the US, whether they're on H-1B or F-1, will get money gifted to them. For example, gifts in India from a parent. Well, we also have to source, where did the parents get the money? How did they earn the money? So really now we're looking at not only the individual, we're looking at the parents or any gifters that are involved. And then when we talk about gifters, we're always talking about who can gift or who can loan you money. So these are all several things that we have to look at to make sure that we understand and immigration understands that this is legitimate money. So a great hypothetical is if somebody has $800,000 and they're using, for example, $200,000 in salary. When we look at salary, we would be looking at them with their tax returns, at least 5 years, how long it took them to earn that $200,000, the bank statements that show that the money got into the account, and then the W-2s and tax returns to substantiate that, and then the current balance that shows that they have at least $200,000 from money coming in over the last 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 years, or however long it may be. Let's say they also got $200,000 from stocks that they've bought. What money did they use to buy those stocks? Did they use salary? Did they use business income? If they use salary, it's going to be the same type of documents. If it's some sort of business income overseas, we have to show how did they start the business? What money did they use to start the business? Can we show the company ownership documents? The same thing goes for, let's say they sold real estate and they were in the US and they sold real estate, or they got a home equity loan. We would have to show how they bought the real estate. What money did they use? Where did they get that actual funds? Can we show that that money was legal? Was it gifted to them? It's not enough to tell immigration that we have tax returns and we can show that we earn those monies on our tax returns. Tax returns only show part of the story, which is how much money you earned. But tax returns don't show where that money ended up. What immigration is looking for is a true linear line of where the money went from. So if you had money on that $800,000 that you were going to use and it starts from 10 years ago, the story is going to start from 10 years ago. Now, there's going to be times where we don't have the documents or banks can't show the documents because it's been 25 years or 30 years, or it could be ancestral land where we just have to show ownership records because our grandparents or our great-grandparents bought that land 50, 60, 80, 100 years ago. Nobody knows. We would want to make sure that we provide proof either from a bank that says that they no longer keep the records, from your CPAs or your certified accountants that say that, hey, that's impossible for us to obtain. We just have to show immigration there's a legitimate reason why we cannot provide the documents. And we've also got to remember that on the other side of this is somebody that's looking at a set of documents that is going to be very in depth. For example, our normal 526 application may only be 15, 20, 30 pages. depending on if you're doing concurrent filing or not. But the supporting documents, the source of funds, we filed up to 2,000 or 2,500 pages. So you've got to think that somebody's actually taking a look at those documents. They're reviewing those documents. And if we don't give them a clear story, we're giving them a reason to either issue an RFE, annoyed, or give them a doubt. So whenever you're going through the idea of, I want to do EB-5, it's really important to understand that you have to have not just an idea of where the money came from, but actual proof and sources of your entire story. So if I'm going to give immigration a story from 10 years ago, and I'm going to write that story out, it's going to look perfect and it's going to sound perfect, but I've got no supporting evidence for that, it's going to be difficult to prove. With USCIS, there's always a moving target. Immigration is not always clear, as we always know that, but it's our job as attorneys to make sure that we're telling your story as perfect as we can. We don't want to submit a source of funds file that has any doubts or holes in it whenever we submit it, because we don't want that to be the reason immigration is either questioning the file, issuing an RFE, or even issuing a denial because we don't have the supporting documents. At our firm, we make sure that if we're going to send an EB-5 file in, we want to know that all the I's have been dotted, T's have been crossed. Our forensic accounting has essentially been done in-house, and that's what our team does. We make sure that from the beginning to end, we've got all your source of funds. That may mean that sometimes it's going to take longer than the investor wants it to take. Sometimes it's going to be frustrating. Sometimes it's going to be challenging. We've had several cars here recently where the investors thought they've given us everything, and we've told them, well, no, we've got to go further back to gifts or further back to another country to try to get documents. And it is frustrating, and we understand that. But we also know that it's a big investment for you. And if you're going to invest $800,000 or $1,050,000 into an investment, we want to make sure that we're doing it right and we're protecting you as much as we can from immigration issuing you a denial or an RFE. We tell clients all the time, this is a marathon, not a sprint. EB-5 can be complicated, but we try to simplify the process as much as we can by making sure that the clients have a great story to tell us. We ask the clients to give us that story. We vet the funds. We go through the information before we even ask the clients to hire us, because we want to make sure they're a viable candidate. We don't want the investor to go through a process and at the very end, after they've paid an attorney and they've already selected a developer, to then feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not even going to qualify for EB-5. We want to do that on the front end. So if you're considering EB-5, if it's something that you're looking to do in the future, I recommend that you talk to us, talk to the attorney, take a look at this video, get your questions down, because it's going to be a process, but one that is challenging, but one that we can overcome with proper documentation, a proper story, and good representation. If you have any questions, please let us know. We'd be more than happy to help.